Howdy readers, I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is my first video in the hashtag Cromwellathon. So for those of you who missed my announcement video, I will link to that below. But I am hosting a read-along in January of Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, and in February of her novel Bring Up the Bodies, which is the second in the Thomas Cromwell series. And then in March, with the publication, the long-awaited publication of the third book in the series, The Mirror and the Light. So it seems a number of you are participating, which is wonderful. I don't know how many of you are planning to make videos, but if you decide to make videos as part of the Cromwellathon, I'm doing mine every Saturday for the 3-month stretch. And I'm planning to just kind of make sort of chatty impressions videos. I'm not going to analyze the text too terribly much. I just want to leave people with how the pages in question struck me this time around. This is my third time reading this book. So if you're wanting to make videos, though, as part of the Cromwellathon, please feel absolutely free to take whatever approach you want with your videos. This is just what I'm going to be doing, right? So just kind of chatty impressions videos. For this first Saturday, we read the chapters Across the Narrow Sea, Paternity, and At Austin Friars. And on this third read, one of the things that I wasn't expecting to find is that the book is more humorous than I remembered it being. There is a lot of kind of mischievous wit in the novel thus far. I feel like especially between Thomas Cromwell and Cardinal Wolsey, it's almost like the two of them can't believe the farce of Henry's making that they have found themselves in the middle of. And their banter is really a joy to read, I find. The second thing is I really, really love, and I'm really noticing how Hilary Mantel, how adept and how deft she is at just dropping us into scenes and into relationships without feeling the need to set everything up, which is really refreshing. The very first scene in the book, right, the very beginning of the book, where young Thomas Cromwell, 15-year-old Thomas Cromwell, is having the shit kicked out of him, literally, by his father. She drops us into the middle of it, right? We don't see the beginning of the fight. We don't get any kind of intimations of their history or their relationship. She just plunges us right into the violence of the moment. And she trusts us to find our bearings quickly, which we do. You know, at the beginning of the next chapter, when she drops Cromwell into Wolsey's presence, and, you know, his servants are kind of fluttering about, trying to make him and Cromwell as comfortable as possible. Thomas Cromwell's been on the road, I think from Yorkshire, I think it was. We don't get a ton of backstory, or maybe even any backstory, really, about the relationship between Cardinal Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell, who is now in his early 40s. She just kind of drops us into the conversation and trusts us to figure things out. Again, which we do. And what I really love about what she's doing here, dropping us into these scenes, dropping us into these relationships without any kind of lead-in or setup, any kind of sort of stage setting, if you will, is that I feel like it's really a mark of her as a writer trusting us as readers. And it's a beautiful thing to be a reader and to sense that you're being trusted, that the writer has considered you capable of following where she's leading. Because not a lot of writers, or not enough writers, do that, actually. You know, they're kind of always leading us by the hand. And Hilary Mantel doesn't do that. She trusts us to have a brain. She trusts us to have a heart, to be able to think and to be able to maneuver through a text. And I just love realizing that a writer believes in me. And the last thing I wanted to comment on before I start moving through the pages and talking about just a couple of things that I have marked is how lived in the relationships feel. Between Cromwell and Wolsey, there's a kind of warm and weary chumminess, I felt like. And then between Cromwell and his wife Liz, there's a kind of exhausted, tender shorthand. The way that they communicate each other is so kind of truncated in ways, right? Like they don't need to say much. It feels very much like an actual marriage. Hilary Mantel has such a gift at defining characters within their relationships. And that works so well for her because she's so good at defining the relationships by just presenting them to us, by giving them to us. She's not philosophizing about them. She's not necessarily even framing them. She's just presenting them to us. She's, again, dropping us into this marriage between Thomas Cromwell and Liz Wickes. And what we see and what we sense helps us define the characters as individuals, as well as in relation to each other. And it's just a beautiful thing. She's so good at this. As I was reading these pages at one point, I sent a Voxer message, texted a Voxer message, I think it was to Roz, whose new channel I will be talking about in a video tomorrow. But I think I told her that when Hilary Mantel is firing on all cylinders, when she is at her best in this book, I don't think there's any novelist living in the world today who is better than she is. So fight me, I suppose, if you disagree. But I just wanted to go through and just chat a little bit about some of the things that I marked in the text. So in the first chapter, Across the Narrow Sea, there are a couple of moments in this chapter that I thought really point toward the kind of man Thomas Cromwell is going to grow up and become. He's very proactive about putting himself in an advantageous position. So after he's been beaten by his father, he shows up on his sister's doorstep. Her husband comes home. We don't know at this point, I don't believe, that her husband is Welsh or has a Welsh background. But at one point when they're talking, Thomas begins speaking to them in Welsh. And then Morgan, Thomas Cromwell's brother-in-law, just stares. And about Cromwell, Hilary Mantel writes, "He almost grins, would do if it wouldn't split his face open. All those days he'd spent hanging around the Williamses' households, did they think he'd just come for his dinner? No. I mean, he is learning how to speak another language, right? I mean, he's like a sponge. He's taking everything in. And because he wants to make sure that he's putting himself on as sound a footing as possible for his manhood, for his future. And I just thought it was a brilliant little detail. And at the very end of that first chapter, that last paragraph, "The weather is cold, but the sea is flat. Cat has given him a holy medal to wear. He has slung it around his neck with a cord. It makes a chill against the skin of his throat. He unloops it. He touches it with his lips for luck. He drops it. It whispers into the water. He will remember his first sight of the open sea, a gray, wrinkled vastness like the residue of a dream." And again, right, she has given him this medal as a way of kind of safeguarding his life, safeguarding his soul. And he appreciates the gesture, I think, which is why before he drops it into the sea, he kisses it. But he doesn't want that medal to be responsible for any of the good that awaits him. He wants to be responsible for it himself. Again, he wants to stand on his own 2 feet. And so from the very beginning of the book, we're getting these wonderful indications of how strong a character he is, of how mindful of his future, of how ambitious he is. Then on page 31, this is close to the end of the chapter called Paternity. I love how, so we've already been given Cromwell as a boy. We've already, sort of been introduced to Cromwell through conversation with Wolsey. But she hasn't really told us anything about Thomas Cromwell as a man yet. And she gives that to us right near the end of the chapter Paternity. She has this standalone paragraph. "Thomas Cromwell is now a little over 40 years old. He is a man of strong build, not tall. Various expressions are available to his face, and one is readable, an expression of stifled amusement. His hair is dark, heavy, and waving, and his small eyes, which are a very strong sight, light up in conversation, so the Spanish ambassador will tell us quite soon. It is said he knows by heart the entire New Testament in Latin, and so, as a servant of the cardinal, is apt, ready with a text if abbots flounder. His speech is low and rapid, his manner assured. He is at home in courtroom or waterfront, bishop's palace or inn-yard. He can draft a contract, train a falcon, draw a map, stop a street fight, furnish a house, and fix a jury. He will quote you a nice point in the old authors, from Plato to Plautus and back again. He knows new poetry and can say it in Italian. He works all hours, first up and last to bed. He makes money and he spends it. He will take a bet on anything. And reading this, it occurs to me that this is an inventory, which makes one wonder if Hilary Mantel might not be writing Dude Bro Lit. Food for thought. But I love that paragraph, right? I mean, it's just these simple declarative sentences, but it gives us so many facets of his character, of what he's like, of how keen and how savvy he is. He becomes, just in that one paragraph, Thomas Cromwell becomes like a diamond with all of these different sides and all of this kind of depth and all of this light and shadow. It's just wonderful writing. It's absolutely wonderful writing. And then the last thing I wanted to point out or to share with you guys is so early in that paternity chapter, right, when we have this kind of, again, this kind of chummy banter between Cromwell and Wolsey. It says, the servants have faced themselves, melting away towards the door. What else would you like, the cardinal says. The sun to come out? So late, you tax my powers. Dawn would do. The cardinal inclines his head to the servants. I shall see to this request myself, he says gravely, and gravely they murmur and withdraw. Right, so there's this kind of playfulness between the two of them, and Cromwell essentially asks Cardinal Wolsey to bring the sun out, to bring dawn. And then, so from there, he goes back to his home at Austin Friars, spends the night with his wife. And when morning arrives, Thomas Cromwell, with Rafe, who is a kind of servant of his, a kind of member of his household, a young man, they are returning to the cardinal, and the chapter ends with this right here. Rafe comes in, first back to my Lord Cardinal. Where else, he says. He gathers his papers for the day, pats his wife, kisses his dog, goes out. The morning is drizzly but brightening, and before they reach York Place, it is clear the cardinal has been as good as his word. A wash of sunlight lies over the river, pale as the flesh of a lemon. And what I love about that is that Hilary Mantel is referencing something that happened quite a few pages earlier. It's something that had been kind of jokey, kind of mischievous, and turns it into the reality of the dawn, and turns it into something that is so still and so beautiful, makes this kind of connection between those. And that last sentence there, a wash of sunlight lies over the river, pale as the flesh of a lemon. That is such beautiful writing. Can't you just see it, right, in your mind's eye? A quality of sunlight that is precisely that color of yellow, right? Incredibly pale, translucent, almost translucent, glistening. There's just something so lovely and so precise about that prose. And that's the thing, right? I mean, the book is, my edition is 600 pages long, and it's full of writing like that. It's absolutely chock full of prose like this. So anyway, yeah, those are my first impressions of these first 3 chapters on Wolf Hall. Check the description box below, please, to find out what chapters I'll be reading for next Saturday so that you can join me. And I will see you guys again very soon. Adios.